Hi, I'm Tommy Powell, Technical Field Specialist with MGK. Today we're going to talk about ant control. And if after my presentation, if you have any questions you'd like to ask me at all, I'd be happy to answer any questions. You can always email me at the address on the screen here, thomas.powell@mgk.com. I'll say that one more time. thomas.powell@mgk.com. Be happy to answer any questions. So, a little bit about me. I have a master's degree in entomology from the University of Florida. So, I'm a Gator. Been in the business for 24 years, either as a technical director for 3 top 100 pest control companies, or for a part of my career, about 6 years, I ran a branch in North Carolina. That's where I currently live. And I ran a branch, had 26 technicians in my branch. So, what you're going to get in this AMP presentation is a lot of my field experience, a lot of going out, solving ant problems, talking to customer, a lot of customer service related things. And we're going to talk about biology of ants because a lot of times people think, oh, biology, it's kind of boring, right? It's a boring subject. But there, especially with ants, biology is actually very important, will help you solve ant problems. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about 3 ant species. We're going to talk about controlling those ant species. We're going to talk about odorous house ants. We're going to talk about carpenter ants, and we're going to talk about fire ants. So here we go. We're going to talk about ants. And why do we talk about ants? So in all the magazines that you might read about pest control, ants have been for a very long time, have dominated the importance. So they're number one pest. So when we're dealing with ants, it's the number one pest that we deal with. Now, there in our industry, there's a love and a hate relationship for ants. As a former branch manager, I loved ants because in the spring, ants made the phone rings for sales. You want sales to happen, get you a bunch of ants going all over somebody's kitchen. They're going to call, right? So makes the phone rings. However, sometimes when they call, they're already a customer. So it's a lot of revenue generated from ants, but also a lot of callbacks. So we got to know how to control ants. And that's what we're talking about today. Now, there's a lot of classes out there for ants that are all about identification. And the instructor will go through the nodes. They might talk about the number of antennae segments. That's not this class. This is not an identification class. I focus mostly on control, a little bit of biology, but we'll talk a little bit about the way I identify ants in the field. So, there's sometimes you don't have a microscope. You need a microscope to count the number of antennae segments on an ant. And sometimes when you're looking at an ant, even me, it's hard to identify. So then you need to take it back to the office, and get a microscope, something that you can see some of these features. But a lot of times, like with the ants we're going to talk about, there's ways to do that in the field. So the first piece of biology we're going to talk about is the colony. And sometimes, we throw this term around, well, the nest, the colony. Well, different types of ants, that can mean different things. So a colony can mean multiple nests or one nest, just different types of ants. Fire ants, for example, they can be multiple nests in a colony, but typically that one mound you see, that's the entire colony. That's one nest, one mound, that's it. That's the colony. But there's other ants like odorous house ants, and if this little picture here shows you, these are Argentine ants. That's one colony. All those little dots make up a single colony. So they're all related. Those are different nests that they identify throughout this neighborhood, and that makes one big colony. So they're related, they talk, don't think of them as separate nests. They're not. So if one of those nests, if we are at this house here, if this is my treat, nope, so sorry. Get my little pen out. If this is my house that I'm servicing right here, and I got this nest here that I find, that's fine. I can kill that nest, but other colony members will move back into that spot. If that if that nest with the little X on it finds a food source, they're going to tell their friends and family. They're going to reach out and say, "Hey, there's potato chips in the kitchen." That's how they work because it's one big family. That's a big family, but they're all communicating with pheromones. They do not fight each other for resources. In fact, they share resources around that house. So in that situation, treatment is different. It's much easier to handle a single nest, single colony than something like this, which would be more like an odorous house ant nest, okay, which we're going to talk about first. This would be an odorous house ant example. It's a carpenter. It is a Argentine ant, but odorous house ants are just like Argentine ants when it comes to their colony and nests. So everybody's seen a slide like this, complete metamorphosis, whether you knew it or not. Maybe you're new and you didn't know that there's an egg stage to an ant. There's a larvae stage, like a little worm, and then it pupates just like a butterfly and turns into the adult. So they have complete metamorphosis. But what I'm going to focus on is this right here. Knowing a little bit about the larvae, not the adult, will help you control ants because the larvae is truly the stomach of the ant colony. Now, have you ever looked at or picked up a rock and you look at that rock and you see this nest of ants under the rock and they're grabbing stuff and they're running for the hills? I mean, think about it. I mean, if somebody right now grabbed the roof of the building you're sitting on and looked inside this giant creature, looked inside, everybody would be running around. They would grab the most valuable thing to them. It would be the dog that's sitting here watching me do this presentation for me, and they would flee out of the house, and that's what would happen. When these ants are running because you've disturbed their home, they're grabbing something very important to them. And most people say, "Oh, they're grabbing their eggs because they're round and they think, oh, those are eggs." A lot of species of ants, you would need a microscope to see the eggs. You're not going to see that in their mouth. In their mouth parts, you're not going to see that. What they're grabbing most of all is the larvae, because the larvae is truly the stomach of the ant. I'm going to explain that in a second. So this was a picture taken by I think, a brilliant entomologist, not me. And what they did was they sliced this ant's head in half, and they're able to show the inner workings of the head. That's what this is, the head of the ant. And then they start zooming in on the throat of this ant. That's what this is right here, this esophagus. That's the throat of the ant. So we're gonna get so that we're already. I think this is an amazing picture. The detail, the how small this thing really is, and how you can really see all the inner workings. But as we zoom into the throat, now remember, this is the throat of a tiny little creature, an ant. The throat of the ant. What we see inside the throat of an ant are these little hairs. So, in that tiny little throat of the ant are all these little hairs, and the space between the hairs is zero point 0.2 to 1 micron in size. And you might say, "Well, Tommy, what's 0.2 to 1 micron? What's a micron?" That is not even the metric system that they tried to shove down my throat when I was going to school. I think they gave that up. That's not even metric system. We're not even talking about millimeters. We're talking about microns. So what's a micron? The human hair is 70 microns in size. Remember, 0.2 to 1 micron. Human hair, 70 microns inside. This is how small, what a wonderful picture that is. Aerosol spray. If you spray something out of an aerosol can, that liquid that comes out is 50 microns in size. If you ever use like a ULV fogger, one of those foggers that you put into a restaurant or something like that, the chemical that comes out of that, a little bit smaller than an aerosol can, 20 microns in size. And the coolest piece of equipment we have in pest control, if you've never used it, It's rare that somebody gets to use it. I've used it personally, and I think they're very cool. It's just like basically a big jet engine. It's a big engine that shoots a flame out and burns the chemical. And the chemical, when it burns through, turns into a smoke. And that smoke is 5 microns in size. So a thermal fogger is what we're talking about there. 5 microns in size when that smoke. You've probably seen videos of this smoke coming out of this piece of equipment. That's what we're talking about. 5 microns in size. In space between the hairs is zero point 0.2 to 1 micron in size. So other than being cool and you just learned something about the throat of an ant, how does that help me kill ants? Well, how it helps you kill ants is you have to know that an adult ant can't swallow solid food. They just can't. They just can't do it. Ain't nothing going down zero point 0.2 to 1 micron in size, right? Really small space in between the hair. So they have that filter in their throat. They can only swallow liquid food. So whether or not you knew this or not, what you see in the field all the time, you see this in the field constantly. You put a gel bait out, that's a liquid. They surround it, they eat it, they consume it, they love it, they're all over it. Okay? Any kind of liquidy bait or gel bait, they eat right away. You put a granular bait, what do? They don't sit there and, hey, Billy, come over here and get a bite of this granular bait that they put out here. No, they pick it up and they carry it. Why are they doing that? Because they're taking it to the larvae. Remember, I told you the larvae is truly the stomach of the colony. They're giving the colony any kind of nutrients, it's proteins and stuff that are coming from solid food. Little closer up picture. They have chewing mouth parts. So I'm an ant. I find a potato chip in the kitchen. I take that potato chip. I go to the colony. I feed it to this larvae. The larvae has chewing mouth parts. They don't have that filter in their throat, right? They're chewing it up. They're chewing it up. They're chewing it up. Now, eventually, you know, I want that potato chip goodness for myself, but I couldn't eat it when it was solid. But now that larvae has digested it. So just like a bird, they come up to that little larvae and they take their mandibles, their mouth parts, and they squeeze their little larvae head like that. That larvae's going to throw up a beautiful bubble of potato chip goodness right on top of its head, and they can eat that. That's how they get solid food. That's a wonderful story to tell at dinner time. Next time your family gets together, maybe a Thanksgiving story about the throw up at the top of a larvae's head, and that's how they get protein. I love telling that stories, but my family thinks I'm weird, but I embrace that. So that's just me. Now, other than being another cool story that Tommy just taught you, right? What does that teach us again? What does that teach me for control? Tommy, you said biology has control. Anytime an ant is carrying a solid piece of food in their mandibles, where are they going? They're going home. They're going towards the nest. They're going towards their nest. Could be multiple nests in the yard, but it tells you the direction of where the nest is. And to me, that's the very first step in any kind of ant control. Are the ants in the house? Are they nesting in the house? Or are they nested in the yard? First question you need to answer. That's the first question you need to answer. And all you need to do is find a trailing ant. It's just ant trailing. One of them will have something solid in their mouth, and whatever direction they're going, that's the direction of the nest. So that little piece of biology, you don't have to follow the ant for 20 minutes, 30 minutes to find the nest. You don't have to do that. You just have to see something with a solid piece of food in its mouth, wherever that's going, whatever direction it's heading, it's going to the larvae. The larvae are always in the nest. That's where the nest is. That's where they're going. They're going towards the larvae. Kind of cool. Now, I love this little graphic, and I'll refer to it for people and ants at the same time here. But this kind of right here, this little dynamic, because this is a social insect we're dealing with. People are social. So each stage of life with ants have a different responsibility, just like this graph shows. Baby boomers are different than Gen Xers, than millennials and Gen Zs. If you ever have one of these classes that people tell you about the differences, Ants are the exact same way. So this little dynamic, the social dynamic, kind of explains how some of our products work. That's why I like to talk about it before we get into killing the ants exactly, but it tells you how your product will affect an ant nest. In the ant world, the baby boomers and the Gen Xers do all the work. Now, I say all the time because I'm in that Gen X category. In my personal opinion, that's how the real world or the people world works. Okay. So you picture this in the ant world, the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, that's all they're doing is looking for food. That's their one focus in life. So if you're ever out and you're just walking around and you see a single ant all by itself, there's no trail, it's all by itself trying to find food, that's an old ant. That's their job. The rest of the colony, they come back, the rest of the colonies, did you find food? No. Get your butt out there and find food. They're expendable. They die, they die. They don't the nest doesn't care. The millennials, I kind of picture them sitting back in their game chair, playing their video games, waiting for some old aunt to come back and say, "There's potato chips in the kitchen," right? And then I can see them rolling their eyes, going, "Oh man, can't you just wait? I gotta pause my game. I'm in the middle of something." That's their job. Their job is when the old ant finds a food source, they come, and that's when you see the trail. They're following that pheromone that old ant left back to the nest, and they trail out in a massive trail. Those are all millennials. The Gen Zers, did I leave them out? No, they never leave the nest. And I've got two of those at my house. So I've got a 20-year-old and I've got a 19-year-old. And I can tell you right now, that's the way they are. They never want to leave home. They're online all the time. They're talking to friends in Canada. Honestly, one of my children don't even have a driver's license. I don't know what that is all about, but in that Gen Z category, they never leave the nest. So there's a bunch of young ants, really young ants in that nest that they don't leave. Even when there's a trail, the millennials are doing the trail, the old ants are finding food. The little ants, the Gen Zers, are just hanging out with the queen. They're just moving eggs around. They're getting that potato chip goodness from the larvae. They're doing all kinds of work for the queen. That's what they do. They stay home. They're home 24/7. Okay. And as they get older, they progress. Now, you go out to a house and you put a pyrethroid out at a house. We have lots of pyrethroids. There's, bifenthrin, demand, onslaught, fast cap. There's a lot of products out there that are pyrethroid, and that's what we typically use around a house. So you put a pyrethroid around a house. Now, the nest is in the house. Has anybody ever told you that sometimes if the nest is in the house, you can trap them in the house? You're not really trapping them in the house. You're forcing all foraging to only happen in the house. And here's why. So you've got this old ant. You can picture him. He's on his walker. No, she. They're all she's. So she's on her walker. She's out there looking for food, looking for food. She goes outside. My nest is inside. It's in a wall void. I go outside. I cross your pyrethroid treatment. They're fast acting products. They kill very quickly. Nothing slow about death from a pyrethroid when it comes to an insect. You're going to kill very quickly. That old ant never makes it back. Do the millennials care? No, they don't care. They're not like, "Hey, where'd Betsy go? She never came back from the foraging." They don't care. There's lots of old ants. If one dies, they don't send out a search party, right? They don't care. So that's just a dead ant. Doesn't really matter. So the only ants that ever find food to tell the millennials to trail are the ones that stay in the house and find foods in the house. So what happens in that situation is you force all trailing, the nest is in the house, to be in the house. So the customers can see more ants they've ever seen in their entire life. That's how you trap ants. You're actually, with pyrethroid, because they kill so quickly, the ant colony, the nest does not know there's a food source. You're actually moving foraging around. You're stopping foraging. Now, just the opposite. I go out to a house, I see a trail of ants. The ants are trailing with solid food out into the wooded area. I'm not going to go look for that. I know they're not nested in the house and they're nesting in the wooded area. I might put a pyrethroid around that house. It's like a light switch. No more foraging. Wham! No more old ants are ever going to find food in that house because they're not going to make it back to the wooded area to tell the millennials to come out. So when you know this, it's when do you use those quick kill pyrethroids and when do you not. You can always go with the slower products like Termidor's slower. There's all kinds of ours is Sumari. There's all kinds of different products out there that kill slower, and you could always go with that. But I like using a pyrethroid when I know they're not nesting indoors. I'll treat somebody's kitchen with a pyrethroid, stop that foraging immediately, and then go outside. We're going to talk about that and kill ants. So, a little bit about biology. This is just a cool fact. You know, just like that story of you can tell about the larvae throw up on the top of their head. This is just a cool little thing. Most ants get sugar not from your sugar bait that you give them, but from plant feeding insects like these. This little glob right here, I'm going to focus on this one down here. So that little blob right there looks like somebody sneezed on that leaf. That's called a scale insect, okay? And these scale insects are eating the plant juice from this leaf, and there's so much sugar in that plant that they can't digest it all. So they just poop it out. And that's called honeydew. That's the nice way of saying plant feeding insect poop. Um, that's where all these ants get all their sugar from. So if you see ants trailing up a tree, nice big fat trail going up the tree, or they're all over a shrub, what they're going after is sugar sources like this. And a lot of people have this attitude like ants kind of protect these creatures, they take care of them, and they do. They'll kill like ladybug larvae that will eat scale and aphids and things like that. They'll kill them and protect these little insects. But when they want food from them, they don't ask nicely. They basically beat them up. And that's what I wanted to show you in this video. So down there where that arrow is, those two little ants right there are about to beat literally the mess out of that poor little scale insect. And you're going to about to see some violence. And, if there's any small children in the room, they might want to look away, right? You're about to see some violence on this video here. And with how they do that is they take their antennae and they do what they call drumming. So they're going to boom, 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 boom. They're going to smack that poor little scale insect, and he's going to go, oh, and a little droplet of sugar is going to come out, and the one ant that gets it going to go wandering off. The other one's going to turn around and beat up another scale insect. So that's what's about to happen. So I warn you. You've been warned. Here we go. See them? See them with their antennae flailing real quick? Look at that. Oh, that guy at the bottom, he got it. The one at the top was jealous. He was like, "What? Hey, I didn't get anything." Let's see that carnage one more time. So see their antennae? They're flailing like that real fast. That is drumming of a scale insect. Just a cool fact. Nothing to do with control. I just think it's neat. All right, odorous house ants. So how do I identify odorous house ants in the field? Okay, they get their name because they produce a strong odor. A lot of ants have an odor. Argentine ants have a little bit of a sweet odor. Odorous house ants, I'll take an odorous house ant, small black ant, right? I grab it with my fingers, I crush it, and I get it about right here. I'm a little bit of an connoisseur when it comes to ants. I get right about in there, and you'll smell it. It's a strong odor. Argentine ants, you got to almost get it up in the nostril like that. You want to really hold on to that ant tight. You let it go, you're going to have an ant up into your sinuses. Not a good day. Might have come from experience. You really don't want to sniff too many ants. It messes you up. Then you're talking about beating up, scale insects on a video. So, when you crush that ant, you're going to smell it from a distance. You're going to get about here. You're going to smell it. That's an odorous house ant. If you have to get it up close to the nose like this, that's not an odorous house ant. Okay? That's how I identify it in the field. Most of the time, I'm right with that. Strong odor. Odorous house ant. Boom, done. Most common ant in the U.S. Okay, usually wins the most common ant every year when there's a surveys that go out and technical people fill it out and say number one ant we deal with is odorous house ant. Most of the time they win. Okay, they have colonies like we talked about before, just like Argentinians. So there's a colony, but there's a whole bunch of little nests that make up that colony. It's not just one. Okay, whole bunch of little nests, and they don't like disturbance. So this is just a video, and this happens more than you think. A lot of times people don't realize this. This is a video of a bunch of odorous house ants moving house. So I just thought it was a cool. See that one odorous house ant got that larvae in its mouth right there? It's heading for the hills. So what happens is odorous house ants like to move all the time. And the reason why they do that is disturbance. What can disturb the nest? Rain. You get a really heavy rain event and the water comes in. Maybe they're underneath a rock or something like that. And underneath that rock is too saturated. There's too much water. They're going to move, and they're going to move. And I'm telling you this for a reason, because you've seen this before. This has happened to you before. They've moved on you and you don't know where they are. So they move a lot. Moving day. This is also why odorous house ants love to nest indoors or actually in a crawl space. I'm in North Carolina, and when I have an odorous house ant call and the technician can't get rid of it, 90% of the time, I'm like, well, they're in the crawl space. Technicians don't like to go into crawl spaces. Most of you guys identify with that. You don't like to go into crawl spaces. So, they get in crawl spaces, they get between that subfloor and that paper insulation, and they love it. Why do they love wall voids and crawl spaces? They like that because there's no disturbance. It's not raining down in the crawl space. Nobody's actually adding mulch to a crawl space. Nobody's raking the mulch back and putting new plants and disturbing their area in a crawl space. Nobody's doing that. So that's why they like that, because there's no disturbance. Their nest can get big and they don't have to spend the time moving. They will move when they're disturbed. This is an ant that likes to move. Baiting. So we in the industry love to bait. I sometimes think, because I've been out with a lot of technicians, it's a little bit of a crutch. Okay. In the industry, a lot of your researchers, your university type folks, they love baiting because it's least toxic. You're not really usually contaminating a large area with a pesticide or spraying large amounts of pesticide, and it takes it directly back to the nest. And I get all that. And I love baiting myself, but there's a proper way to do it indoors. So in this situation, with this picture here, what you see, and there's more to the story here, what you see is a technician who came in, they put some bait right here, they put some bait up here, and they probably, with these odorous house ants, did a really, really good job of explaining to the customer how baits work. You know what, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, here's what's going to happen. The ants are going to come. Those millennials, remember, they're going to find that after the old guys find it, the millennials will come out and they're going to take that bait back to the nest and they're going to feed it to all the nest. And this is how we're going to get rid of this problem. It's the best way to do it. We're going to bait in your kitchen. Okay. Oh, that sounds wonderful, technician. You really know your stuff. You leave and they go about their business and they come back in the kitchen, and lo and behold, two or three nests have been alerted to your bait in that kitchen. That's not just one nest, by the way. That's multiple millennials from several different nests converging on the bait on the side of that wall. Now, when they see this, when the customer sees this, I don't care how good you think you are about explaining how baits work. The first thing they're going to do is underneath the sink here is there's going to be some Windex and Raid sprayed all over those ants. The second thing they're going to do is they're going to pick up the phone and they're going to call your office, and your poor customer service rep, and I've heard these calls myself, is going to hear that panicked, who is that? Oh, the ants are everywhere. I don't know what he did. Oh, whatever that technician did, they're terrible. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know. Yeah. Now, before they thought you were the hero. In this situation, when you got this kind of a trail going on in a countertop, you are the zero, my friend. You don't know how to kill ants. You don't know what you're doing. And they're telling the customer service rep, somebody's got to be out here now. It's bad. I can't live here. I can't live like this. Oh, they're everywhere. I just can't even, I can't walk in the house. They're going to panic. Okay. So when you bait indoors, the only time I bait indoors is when I know that nest, number one, is in the house. Okay. That's the only time I ever put a very highly attractive sugar bait into anybody's house, is when I know the nest is in the house. When I have proof that an ant is carrying solid food towards the house and is going into the kitchen window or something like that, then I know, or I see them coming out of an outlet. That's when I bait indoors. And when I bait indoors, I don't do this. I hide my bait. I always joke around, but I'm like the Easter bunny, man. I'm putting bait where you just can't see it, You got those eggs that you'll find 3 years from now that has been hidden in the backyard for a while. That's me. I'm hiding that bait. I'm going to take that outlet cover out. I'm going to put my bait back in the wall void where I saw them come out of that outlet cover. There could be 10,000 ants feeding on that bait in the wall void, and you are the hero because they're not on their countertop. In this situation, when you put it out in the open, if you put it on their countertop, you're the zero. I mean, it happens way too much. If they're coming out from underneath the dishwasher, you talk to the customer. Yeah, I think they're in the dishwasher. They're probably in the crawl space, by the way. And if they're coming out from under the dishwasher, bait under the dishwasher. Don't put it out in the open. Hide your bait indoors. Little advice, little tip. Too many customers freak out. They don't want you back. You may never get this call back. Service manager's going out there to solve this problem because they don't want you back because you obviously don't know what you're doing here. That's the reaction you get in this situation. So hide your bait. You're going to bait indoors. I'm going to talk about another way to bait. I bait more frequently outdoors. Yes, I said that. Outdoors than indoors. All gel baits that you use, I don't care which one it is, has an outdoor label. They all have outdoor labels. It's easy to go inside. Where are you seeing them? Squirt, 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 little bait here and there, right out in the open. Then all of a sudden they get thousands of ants and they freak out and they either cancel, call a supervisor, something like that. You can bait outdoors. If they're not in the house, I've actually drawn out ants from a house. In this situation, this was actually this was not a house. This was a commercial situation. There's a little hole right here in this window. This is a commercial building. They weren't nesting in that commercial building. The employee just had some crackers or whatever that old ant found in the desk, and they were going in there for food. So we baited right outside the window. Those ants immediately stopped going in that building. Why? Because they have a beautiful food source right here. They don't need to go in the building anymore. I gave them food right outside. So I stopped. I didn't even treat inside at all. I just stopped off foraging with bait outdoors. So that's one thing you can do with bait. If you see them going in at a certain spot, you can put that bait right outside. That'll stop them from going in. If you want to go in there and treat with the pyrethroid real quick in the kitchen or wherever they're going in, you can do that. That'll also help any foraging because remember, those old ants aren't going to come back and tell the other ants they're there. So I also use this baiting technique to control nests, not just draw the ants out, but especially with odorous house ants, just like that picture I showed earlier with Argentine ants, there could be 3, 4, 5 different nests in your customer's yard. You don't have 2 hours to find all those nests. You got 15 stops on your route today. You got to get them done. So this is an easy way to kill multiple nests in one spot. I do it all the time. I'll find a trail. In this situation, this is a video I'll show you. In this situation, in this video, they're trailing up this tree. And look at all those ants. That is not one nest. That is multiple nests. That trail's a thumb wide there. And what we do is we put gel bait all over this tree. The reason why the ants are there is at first they were there because there's some kind of plant feeding insects up on top of this tree. And they were there getting that honeydew, the nice way to say the sugar poop. They were up there getting the honeydew, and we just reinforced the trail where multiple nests started saying the tree has got lots of sugar. So we reinforced the trail with lots of gel bait on that tree. Then here's the kicker. Here's how I kill all those ants in that nest. I take a slow killing product, make sure it's labeled to be off structure. Some products are not. You got to know which ones are, which ones aren't. I take a slow kill product and we spray it all around this tree. So every ant that is going into this treatment, into this bait to get that bait, they're getting all that slow kill product all over their body, and they've got it all over them. They get that gel bait and they go back, and those poor Gen Zers that are just hanging out all day, haven't seen the light of day since they were born. They've just been in the house the whole time. They're getting touched by those millennials. They're getting a little chemical on them. They're getting fed that sugar substance so they're getting like a double dose of chemical. You're killing them twice, right? Two different ways, one spot. And I do this not just on trees. I've done this on a sidewalk. If they're trailing by a trash can, anywhere you see a trail, I've seen on a fence line. I'll reinforce that trail with the gel bait and treat all around it with the slower killing product. And you will be shocked how quickly you can kill 3 or 4 nests at a time. And you could do it fast. Just as easy as baiting indoors. Takes a little more effort looking for the trail. You bait it, you treat around it, done. You're going to kill multiple nests. Okay, so just a little trick I use for odorous house ant, works a lot. Now, remember I told you it was important to know that sometimes odorous house ants move. Okay, they move a lot. And I told you, you guys have seen this before. Have you ever gotten a call? And I've got these calls all the time. And I always hate when a customer says, I go, well, where are you seeing the ants? And they go, they're everywhere. Come on. Come on. They're not everywhere. You know, I know those ants aren't everywhere in the house. So I have to always, I say this now more than most of the time. I say this 100% of the time. I'm like, hey, where do you see your ants the most? That's the best way to ask that question. Don't say where do you see them the most? Oh, I mostly see them in the kitchen. Okay, you got ants in the kitchen. They're not everywhere. They're ants in the kitchen. So you show up and there's not a single ant in sight. I would guess right away that you have odorous house ants and that it rained the night that they called, the day they called. Okay, it rained that night. And you show up, guess what it is? It's moving day. It's moving day. You're not going to see any ants. On moving day, they're not going to be foraging for food. They will not be in the house. So if you can't find them in the yard, you can't find them in the house, it's moving day, most likely odorous house ants you're dealing with. Now, I usually give my customer an option here. You can either spray and pray, you got the 2 fingers crossed, and you're like, please, please, please go away. Don't call me. Don't call me. Or you can ask the customer to do this. Now, I give them the option. Either I can treat today, but there's no ants activity. You haven't seen any ants today, have you? No, I haven't. There haven't been any ants today. Well, it's probably because it rained yesterday and maybe they got disturbed. So we can do this where I'll treat, or what you can do is you can put a food source out for them. Where do you normally see them? In the kitchen, you told me. Where? Oh, over here by the window. Okay, over here by the window, put a little jelly out, put a little honey water. I did this for the picture. Don't throw it all over the tile, on the ground right here, but this is where the ants were foraging. So I wanted to show great picture. They were all over the honey water on the paper towel, right? So give a little sugar source to them, and when you see the trail, you call me and I'll come back and take care of them. Probably, in my opinion, 20% of the customers will do this. And it's called pre-baiting. So they'll pre-bait for you. Most customers are going to go with the spray and pray. I don't call it that, but most people just say, go ahead and treat it. you know. And at that situation, my advice to you is use a slow kill product. You don't know where the ants are coming from. You don't know what kind of ants you're dealing with. I would use a slow kill product around that house, in that kitchen. That's just would be my advice. So any kind of slow kill product that you got, don't use a pyrethroid in that situation. You can make it worse. So that's odorous house ants. So first thing you do, going through the list, direction. Where's that ant carrying the solid food? In the house? That's a different situation. Okay. In the yard? Easy to kill. Okay. That's what you need to know. You can use baits to lure them out of the house. You got to ask those questions about where they see them the most. Okay. Sometimes you've got to get in the crawl space and pull insulation for odorous house ants. If you have a lot of crawl spaces in your area, you need to do that. It's much easier. I can kill a nest of odorous house ants that I see with an aerosol can. You don't need to use a fancy product. If you see the larvae, that's the nest. Kill it. I'm not, I don't play around with no bait when I see the nest. And when you pull that insulation down, and I'm going to say this on purpose, slowly, you go yanking a piece of insulation down out of somebody's crawl space, and there's 5,000 ants underneath that piece of paper, and they go sliding off that piece of paper under your head. It's not a fun situation in a crawl space. You're going to hit your head on that subfloor because you're going to freak out a little bit. And there's a little experience talking there, and you want to go slowly. You see the ants, you can pull it the rest of the way down. When you're out of the way, spray them with an aerosol can, dust them. A lot of times we say, don't dust too much. In that situation, let it snow. I want to see white ants running all over the place. Okay? You're going to kill them. So easy to do. Sometimes you have to get in the crawl space. Carpenter ants. All right. So carpenter ants, how do I identify carpenter ants in the field? First thing you'll see, okay, and this works for me most of the time. There are some tricky ants out there. First thing you'll see, it's going to be the larger ant, and there's some other ants. There's field ants that are about the same size as the carpenter ants, but it's going to be a bigger ant. So in our area, the black carpenter ant's very common, but there's other carpenter ants out there. There's a western carpenter ant. There's a Florida carpenter ant. There's all kinds of different carpenter ants, but they're usually bigger in size. This is the most common carpenter ant that's out in the U.S., the black carpenter ant. And when you see this carpenter ant, immediately the larger, so there's going to be some different size ones. The bigger ones are going to have that really pretty, in my opinion, I know, saying ant's pretty, yellow hair all over its abdomen. So you see that in the picture, that yellow hair all over its abdomen. I know it talks about smooth thorax. I know you've heard that from other entomologists. That's hard to see in the field, okay? So I look at the size and those yellow hairs. If you don't see that, you might want to take a specimen or something like that into the office, look for that evenly rounded thorax, and that'll tell you it's a carpenter ant. Or if you're doing stuff and you just can't, these are the normal things I do for carpenter ants. This is what Tommy told me to do, and I'm not getting control. Might not be a carpenter ant. Need to get that thing identified. So this doesn't work all the time when I do that field site identification. That's how I identify them in the field. So this is, again, the area we find the black carpenter ant. There's other carpenter ants out there, but they're all relatively big in size. You can immediately from a distance know that's not an odorous house ant. Typically, they're smaller size colonies. So typically, you're talking about a 10,000, 20,000 ants, maybe 100,000 ants. And it is a single parent nest. It's a little bit different of a situation. So you have a single nest that is the colony with a queen, all that kind of stuff in that one nest. But then that nest can break out into have these little satellite nests. The satellite nests do not have queens, unlike an odorous house ant where every nest has a queen and they're all breeding and producing eggs and getting bigger and bigger and spreading. That's not the way carpenter ants work. There's one nest with a queen, and then there's little satellite nests that come out. Okay, so that's important for control. They like to nest in wood. especially the primary nest with the queen, they're going to be in some kind of rotted moisture wood. That's what they're going to, and they're going to be outdoors unless you have a really severe leak in the wall. If you find a carpenter ant, a true parent nest in somebody's wall void, the water was there did way more damage to that wall than the carpenter ants ever did. Okay. So water damage, then they'll move in. They don't typically move into somebody's house unless it's a satellite nest. Satellite nests, I found a satellite nest in a curtain rod, hollow curtain rod. I found satellite nests in a hollow door. I once found a satellite nest of carpenter ants underneath somebody's dryer. The lady once had her dryer caught fire. She never wanted to use the dryer again. She line dried everything. That's the way she was. And she had a dryer. It was sitting there, never used, unplugged. And there's a void underneath there, and they were right there underneath the dryer. So satellite nests will be anywhere. Anywhere there's a void, they can nest. They don't need a lot of moisture. They're just basically little nests that are outside the parent nest looking for food so they can tell the parent nest, hey, there's potato chip in the kitchen. They're communicating, they're talking, they're all this, always taking care of the parent nest until the wintertime. Then they get cut off. But that's what happens. So when we're talking about the parent nest, that's the first step of carpenter ant control. You got to get the parent nest under control. Then you can start killing the satellite nests. So we're looking for wood. We're looking for wood that has been, a stump, a pile of wood they got that they're not really burning, that's just sitting over there. Those are the places I'm looking for. When you're looking at inside, you'll see sawdust. This is a very exaggerated situation here in this little attic area where that is lots of carpenter ant dust coming out. So when the carpenter ants are nesting, they're taking their mandibles, their teeth, and they're taking a piece of wood and they're tearing it off like that, bit by bit. And that's how they're expanding that gallery. They love moisture damaged wood for a reason and termite damaged wood. Let's take the termite damaged wood first. Think about it from the carpenter ant's perspective, okay? They have to make that big gallery for their bodies to go through in that little hole, and this is a gallery of carpenter ants right here if you've never seen it. So the ants are going to be running back and forth from this gallery. So they got to make it big enough for their bodies. All a termite did was make a pilot hole. They just have to make it bigger. They have to do all the work. Some of the work's been done for them. So they like getting into termite damaged wood and hollowing it out more and making a nest in there. Moisture. Try taking a 2x4 right off of you buy it from Lowe's or Home Depot and imagine taking your teeth and just trying to little piece, trying to rip it off on a solid 2x4. That's hard to do. Take that same 2x4 and soak it in water for a year, and you can take with your finger and pick at it and start pulling it apart. So they like moisture damaged wood because that's easier to hollow out. It's the easier thing to do. They can get into solid wood. They will do it, but that's desperation. Most of the time they'll find some kind of moisture damaged wood that they can nest in because they're not eating the wood. They're not consuming it. They're just nesting in it. So when they are pulling this wood apart and getting that nest, building that nest, and that's not what this is, but I always use an example. They have a little spot they call, it's the exit hole. I always call it the trash hole. Okay. It's the trash chute. If you've ever been in an apartment where there's a trash chute, they have a trash chute. So all carpenter ants, when they pull off a piece of wood, go to the same trash chute and they throw out the piece of wood and then it lands and you'll see a pile. So this is something you can use when you're talking to a customer, Mr. or Mrs. Customer. Do you ever see little piles of dust that just appear for absolutely no reason around your home? Oh, yeah. Over by that windowsill, there's constantly this dust, this wood shavings or something that just keeps coming. I wipe it up, I clean it, and just keeps coming back. Might be a carpenter ant nest, okay? That could be a sign that you got a carpenter ant. You're going to go up to that pile, you're going to look in it. What you're going to look for are body parts. And what I mean by that is I'm a carpenter ant, and I'm old. I'm a Gen Xer, and I die in the nest. I come back, I tell the nest that I've got a potato chip. I kick the bucket right there in the nest. I'm dying. I die in the nest. Well, all the young millennials don't want me stinking up the place, so they got to get me out. What do? Basically, they dismember me. Somebody's going to grab my antennae part, somebody's going to pull my head off, and you're just going to take me to the trash chute like you do all the other stuff. You throw me out. So you throw out little pieces of carpenter ants when somebody dies in the nest. That's what happens. So when you're looking through all that dust, you're going to see a piece of antenna. You're going to see a leg. You won't see a whole carpenter ant, but you'll see, and you'll say, "Look, that's a leg of an ant or some kind of insect." When you see the insect part in that frass, that's a carpenter ant. Primary nest probably in that area. Typically, satellite nests don't like to do that. They'll just nest in something hollow. They don't want to spend the time because they can move around. They don't typically. It's usually a primary nest that'll do that. Okay, so you see that dust, see those insect parts in it. Carpenter ant nest indoors. Now, when we're talking about controlling carpenter ants, number one, you need to know what your policies are for your companies. Different companies have different policies. So don't, if your pest control agreement does not cover carpenter ants, okay, don't be the hero. And I've actually been into 2 lawsuits because of this. You treat for carpenter ants, and all of a sudden, Mr. or Mrs. Smith that loves you, you're the best technician in the world, opens up their wall, doing some renovation, right? And they find carpenter ant damage. They're calling. They're not calling you. They're calling the manager, the owner of the company, and saying, "You treated my house for carpenter ants, and now I got all this damage. Who's paying for this?" Okay? You're friends until you're not. Okay? You're friends up until that point, and then you're not friends anymore. So you're not family. That's just going to happen. So when you treat it, you own it. So, but I get a lot of technicians that go, "But I, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they're awesome. I just want to take care of them." If carpenter ants are a separate agreement, or if a interior nest is a separate agreement, there's all kinds of variations. Here's the concern. Here's how you handle that concern. I want to take care of Mrs. Smith. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I found some carpenter ants in your yard. Okay. And they nest in wood, and they don't do like really huge amount of damage most of the time, but they can damage wood. And I'm a little bit concerned about that. So here's what I'm going to do. If it's okay with you, I'm going to get an inspector out here, usually free. I'm going to get an inspector out here to come take a look at your situation and see and really give your house a once over, because you really don't want these things indoors. And then we'll get you your option and get rid of them. That's showing concern, not just throwing some granulars out in somebody's yard, putting it on your service ticket that you did that, and then all of a sudden you're in a lawsuit and you told Mrs. Smith you did. Now you're in a lawsuit and there's records saying you treated for carpenter ants. I've gotten out of one of my lawsuits, but you just don't do that. All right. So that's my little advice. Sorry, I jumped on a soapbox. When you're dealing with carpenter ants, treating carpenter ants, I love granular baits. I've kind of mentioned granular baits a couple times. Love granular baits. Problem is, these things can forage 300 feet. What is that? It's a football field in any direction. They might not be in your customer's yard. That stump that they're living in, the primary nest that you got to kill, could be in the neighbor's yard. So when you're treating with the granular baits, 2 things, my advice to you. Number one, treat it the last stop of the day. Other things will eat your granular bait. Crickets. Crickets will eat your granular bait. Mice will eat your granular bait. All kinds of things will eat your granular bait. When do the carpenter ants come out the most and forage the most for food? Nighttime. Okay? So by the time nighttime gets around, the carpenter ants are coming out foraging, half your granular baits will be gone. You also can use that trick. Put your granular baits out in the backyard and also surround it with the slow kill product. I can kill ants from a block away doing that in somebody's backyard. So don't give up on that. Use your granular bait. use that slow kill product when they're in that backyard foraging. You're going to get good control. So that's my little advice about treating for carpenter ants outdoors. And then once you kill that primary nest, you need to look for those satellite nests. Now, they can't reproduce, no queens. Eventually, they'll just die of old age. But if your customer's still seeing them indoors, you need to look. Okay, you gotta that's gonna take time. If they're seeing them indoors a lot, you need to schedule some time to go out there and do an inspection. That's why if you have an inspector and it's not covered, get them to do it for you, technician. Another positive. What's in it for you? What's the whiffum? That's the whiffum. Fire ants, fun to control. Not hard to find the nest. The only time I've seen fire ants sometimes forage inside, it's not very common. When I suspect it, when I'm looking at the ant, I'm like, hey, that looks like a fire ant, right there inside the house. I think it's a fire ant. What I do, and again, I know I'm weird, but this is just me. You don't have to do this. I take that fire ant. I don't crush it. I pick it up with my fingers. I put it on my hand. Usually you need some soft skin, so I put it over here where the gap of my hand, my thumb, and my finger are right there. And it'll wander around a little bit. What it's going to do is going to take its mandibles. That's what they do first. I don't know if you knew this. They take their teeth and they grab onto a piece of skin. They're using that for leverage because now they're going to start bending their abdomen down. They're about to sting you. At that point, when I see the butt going down, I knock him off and go, that's a fire ant indoors. Okay? Just if you ever did, it's the way I do that. Most of the time, I do it just like you do. I see the mound, just like this. And it's a mound. It's a built-up mound, pretty easy to find in the yard. You'll see them. Oh, there's a mound right over there. I could see it from a distance most of the time. You just police the yard. Typically, that's one mound is one nest, one colony. They can have multiple mounds, can talk to each other. That actually does happen. Two nests in one colony. That does happen. But they're dome shaped, really easy to see. Not hard to kill, except exactly what this person's doing in this picture. When we see fire ants, I don't know what it is about a fire ant mound that brings this out into every technician I've ever seen in my entire life. The little kid comes out in all of us. And the first thing you want to do is step on that mound. And I see technician, well, I have to determine whether or not it's active or not. That's baloney. Come on, let's be completely honest. You're stepping on that fire ant mound because you want to see them boiling up and it's cool, and that's a little kid doing that. I can look at some mounds from a distance driving a car and go, woo, that's an active mound. Beautiful, cone shape, and fresh soil all around it. That's an active mound. You do not need to step on that. If it's flat, and it doesn't have any kind of shape, you might want to check that out. But don't resist the urge. The problem with fire ant control is not that we don't have good products, okay? There are awesome fire ant baits out there. The problem is fire ants move more than you think, a lot more than you think. You disturb their nest too much, they will just up in there. There are huge tunnels underneath that little dome shape. They're not living in that. They're all underneath the mound, and the queen and all those Gen Zers are just going to come over here and pop up somewhere else, and they're going to move off. They're going to go somewhere else, start a new colony somewhere else, a new nest, and now, oh, well, I treated this nest and another one popped up. Could have been the same nest. You just tried to step on it too much, and little kids, stay away from that. What you want to do is take your granular bait too and put it around the mound. Don't throw it on top. I see technicians, they're feeding the chickens, throwing granular bait with their gloved hand, hopefully, and they're just throwing it all over the mound. Don't do that. You're also disturbing the fire ant mound. You want to leave them alone. The old ant's going to come out, right? She's going to come out with her walker. She's going to find that granular bait and go, woohoo, it's right there. I don't have to go very far. She's going to go back to that nest and tell them there will come out of that mound and get it. You don't have to throw it on top. When you throw it on top, I have seen fire ants pick up granular baits that were on their mound and put them in a trash pile off to the side, and they don't eat it, okay? They'll just leave it alone, and they don't eat it. So you surround that fire ant mound with a little granular bait. This is the two-step program. This is actually a Texas A&M thing. So I'm a Gator, Texas A&M, another SEC program, but I'll stop talking about it. So this is a Texas A&M thing, two-step. You put the granular mounds around it and you lightly treat the mound with a slow kill product. Tommy, you just said don't mess with the mound. Now you're telling me to spray it. I'm not telling you to rod it. Rain happens on those mounds all the time. In fact, when it rains like that, they're going to come out, they're going to see the moisture, and they're going to kind of reconstruct. And what are they doing? They're getting that slow kill product all over their bodies while they're doing that. And you're actually killing a bunch of ants that way. Then they're going to come out, find the granular, and you're doing that double dipping. It's a little bit opposite where you're with the odorous house ant, we create the treatment, the attraction in the center and treat around it. Here, we're treating the mound with a light spray of slow kill product, and we surround that with that granular bait. Just make a little circle around it, with that granular bait. Don't put it on top. That's how I kill fire ants all the time. Pretty easy to do. That's a active mound. I can see that. This on the right-hand side, I don't know if you have pyramid ants in your area or not. Those are pyramid ants. They're not fire ants. If you see a mound with what looks like somebody took a pencil and shoved it in the ground, and there's this really intricate, very delicate, like volcano shape around it, that is not a fire ant mound. That's a pyramid ant mound. Fire ants don't care. They're just taking the sand. They make this big, huge cone like that one on the left. Pyramid ants do. It's not very big. It's not even close to size. We're talking about something about that big around, okay? So about the size of a donut. That's what we're talking about. That's what they make. Pyramid ants try to convince your customer. Number one, customer, that's not a fire ant, okay? Not going to bite you. They're outdoor ants. They don't get indoors, and they're highly aggressive to other ants. That little pyramid ant mound will keep fire ants out of your yard. That little pyramid ant mound will keep odorous house ants out of your yard. You name the ant, that little pyramid, except for crazy ants, that little pyramid ant now will do that. The tawny crazy ant, I've seen actually tawny crazy ants go into that little pyramid ant mound and yank the pyramid ants out of there and kill them one by one. Coolest video I've got on my phone. At least I think so. But so pyramid ants are a good thing. That's actually a deterrent for other ants. Sometimes customers don't want to hear that. Then you have to kill them. You can treat it. The best way to do it is if you've ever on your B&G, maybe you don't know this or not. If you have that four-way tip, there's a big hole in your B&G. That is not a power spray hole. I actually had a technician tell me that. I want to put a lot of product out with my B&G. I just put it on the power spray hole, and I'm like, what? Let me see your power spray hole. And that is a straw. That's where there's a straw that goes in there, right? So what I'll do is I put the little straw and the attachment on the B&G. I put it right down that nice little hole, shove it down there, and then flood that little mound, and you'll kill every pyramid ant in there. And you just cover it up with your foot, make it go away. Okay? So pyramid ant versus a fire ant. So last little tips and tricks. Don't let the little kid come out. Fire ants, everybody's seen a fire ant mound. You've all stepped on one. You don't need to see the ants boiling out. You've seen it time and time again. Leave them alone. Don't do it. Resist the urge. Maybe go back to your house where you've got fire ants and stomp on them all you want, okay? Just don't do it at your customer's house, okay? Leave them alone. Surround it with the granular baits. Treat a light, slow kill product on the top, and that's how I would do that. Non-pyrethroid. When I say slow kill products, examples are like Alpine, Avion WDG, Sumari. Phantom is the slowest killing product, but I don't think Phantom has an outdoor label. It doesn't. So those are the ones I'm talking about. Or Termidor. Problem with Termidor is that's an on structure. unless you're certain special situations. So those are all slow kill products. I take that slow kill product, treat on the top, and then surround it with a granular bait. All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. And remember, if you have any other questions I didn't address, you can always email me at thomas.powell@mgk.com. Thank you very much.